So why for morphology? We keep coming back. This has been a year-long kind of series that Charlie and I have been doing, and we like to try and come back to the questions all the time on why we're doing morphology. And Charlie was, I think, very proactive in actually breaking down that whole knowledge piece out of our curriculum and what it looks like for morphology and the reasons why we should be doing it. So if you look across those grade levels, kindergarten through grade 6, you notice that there are a lot of morphological pieces that have to happen. And so as teachers and leaders across our province, it is our duty, I suppose, that we are breaking that morphological piece down and that we are spending some time doing it. So how we do it is the stuff that we've been playing with all of this year. So depending on what grade level you're in, this is sort of that breakdown of the pieces that we've pulled out of that curriculum that we are now using and that need to be focused for your classroom and on all the work that you're doing around morphology. So it gives you a little bit of the why, I guess, we should be spending some focused time on morphology. So what is morphology? Again, we keep coming back to this orthography system, and we like to come back at it a whole bunch of different ways so that hopefully with the repeating it over and over, you realize that orthography, our spelling system in our English, is made up of these 3 pieces. So morphology being that study of the forms and the structure, those little morphemes that make up the meaning of our language, the etymology, so the history around the words that we're playing with. Where have they come from? What's the history of that word and how have they evolved over time? And then lastly, the phonological awareness pieces. So the phonology. So the system of the sounds and those combinations that make up those words that we're now playing with. So orthography, if we're going to be successful in the spelling and the teachings and the learnings of spelling, we need to have all 3 of these pieces. And so Charlie and I keep talking about hitting different visuals and talking about this and coming to this whole idea in different ways every time we meet. So here's your visual today of those orthographic pieces and all of those pieces that you need to have students successful in our spelling system. So again, here's another visual on how it looks different. And so when we talk, again, those 3 pieces, what is the morphological pieces that we're looking at? So those are those science structures or forms of language. So those little pieces that represent the morphemes that make up the understanding of the words that we're dealing with. So to understand it is to know that morphemes are those smallest pieces that contribute to the word's meaning and the understanding of the words that we're working with. The etymology, like I said, is that origin, like the origin. Where did this word come from? So over time, how has that word been developed and how have we developed more understanding around this word because of knowing where it's come from. So the key piece is explaining that the spelling of those morphemes and the graphemes that we choose actually have some meaning because of where they've come from over time. So an etymon is a word or a morpheme from which a later word has been derived. Okay, and so we need to have that piece if we're going to understand morphology and that whole orthographic system. And then finally, which we do a lot of work in classrooms around our phonicsy programs, this is the system of the sounds that make up those combinations and those patterns that we're seeing in the words that we're working with. So what graphemes and what sounds make up the words? We have to understand those phoneme chunks and understand that those sounds are representing graphemes that will eventually be put together to make up the word. So all 3 of these pieces we need for the orthographic system. Okay, so let's dive into what it could look like in your classroom. So this is going to be a dive into what a week-long structure could be. Not that this is the only way, but these are pieces that you could kind of weave into the daily workings of classrooms to hit morphology. And it would all start with that share of a text. So something that students have to listen to, look at, read, and be part of. And we would dive into the words that are making up this text, and we'd come up with a word that maybe we would dive into a little closer and do a deeper study of. So you're going to listen to this story here. I'm going to put it on for you, and I want you to listen to The Good Egg by Jory John and illustrated by Pete Oswald. And as you're listening to the story, I want you to see if you could, as the teacher, pull out a word that you might spend some time developing and understanding through that morphological lens. What would be a good word based on the meaning of the story that we could pull out of this story to actually do a deeper dive morphologically. So does anyone want to take a throw out of maybe what word I chose today for us based on the understanding and what this story was about?
We both think it might be cracked.
Okay.
I like behavior.
Okay. The one nice thing about morphology is we can pick whatever words that we want. The today one I chose was help, H-E-L-P. And the reason I chose this was because it means to aid or to support. And when I think of what happened in the story and what was going on, this would make sense. And it would be a good word to build some understanding around. Now, if I was looking at the word H-E-L-P, which is help, this would make sense for probably that lower elementary end, right? And the words that you guys kind of pulled out, maybe I'm looking at towards the upper end, which would be great as well. So I want you to just write down on a piece of paper right now, as many words as you can that would use that base. And in the chat, I put the freedictionary.com as well as Edim Online for you to type in the word help, H-E-L-P, to help with your brainstorm. Let's see what words you come up with. Now, remembering that if we're to do some work on morphology, the words that we're brainstorming have to belong in this family. So they have to mean the same with that base, and they also have to be developed around the spelling of that base, H-E-L-P. Okay, let's give you my list here.
You've got 7.
You've got 7? Okay, I'm just going to put on the screen now a brainstorm and kind of a brain dump of the words that could belong in this family. So helpless, helpful, helpfully, unhelpful, helps, helping, self-help, helpable, helper. Now, when we did this brainstorm, we also came up with these other 2 words on the side. So kelp and whelp. And I guess, why wouldn't we allow these words to be part of our H-E-L-P family? What would be the reason why we'd have to put them on the outside?
They're not relatives.
Yeah, so they don't have the meaning, right? They don't have that meaning to aid or to support. If we look at the word self-help, right, that would be a compound word. That does relate to that aid or support. So we can keep that as part of our family. Are there any other questions with the words that have made up this list, or maybe the ones that have made up your list where you are? And then where we go is I'm actually going to now, which could be maybe the Wednesday of your week, I'm going to assess you. So I'm actually going to give you a spelling test of 7 words that I've chosen from the family that we've done some brainstorming around. So this would be your typical spelling test. Now we've done an assessment of some of those words. You can pick as many as you want. I chose 5 to 7. What we now do with those words on another day, or some continued work with morphological study, is I actually now want you to break up those words into what we call synthetic word sums. So now the task would be, we've got a concentrated effort on 5 to 7 words that you now have in front of you, and we would have made sure that they were spelled correctly. Now what I want you to do is actually break up those words into what we call synthetic word sums. So your first word was helping. So what we would do for helping then would be to take that base, and then we would add our suffix ending to give us the final word helping. So the example I wrote on here is the word helps. H-E-L-P-S plus that S is going to give us helps. So now I want you to take those 7 words that we did on our test and actually write them out in a synthetic word sum. Okay, everyone, this is when it gets more difficult for students, and actually the real work of the morphology piece starts to happen when we make kids accountable for what it is they've done. So you've started the writing of some of those synthetic word sums. I'm wondering if there's somebody that wouldn't mind linking into the link that I put into the chat, and actually you can all get in there. This is our Jamboard. This is where kids now come up to the whiteboard or to the screen, wherever you are, to actually now write out a synthetic word sum. And the beauty of morphology is we want to deepen the understanding of the actual spelling of the word by spelling aloud. So when students are sharing their morphological pieces or those synthetic worms, the synthetic word sums that we're talking about, they're actually doing it by verbalizing their spelling. So is there someone out there that would like to, on this Jamboard, give us one of the synthetic word sums that they built and actually do the spelling aloud? Who would like to volunteer? And you're going to teach us through the word by using our Jamboard here.
So we can go H-E-L-P, sorry, plus E-D is rewritten as H-E-L-P-E-D, helped.
Helplessness. Help is H-E-L-P plus L-E-S-S plus N-E-S-S to get helplessness.
Right. So we could write this as, yeah, so H-E-L-P plus L-E-S-S plus N-E-S-S is rewritten as H-E-L-P L-E-S-S N-E-S-S, helplessness.
Yeah. So I have a quick question. Typically, we write the sum and then the full word. So I did it backwards because in how you explained on previously, you had it reversed. So does it matter?
Great questions. So the tendency for kids is to see the word analytically. And Petronella, you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But the deeper dive in the understanding of the word is going to be ingrained if we get kids to, one, say it aloud. So actually spell the base plus the affixes and suffixes that need to go on there, the prefixes and suffixes. I am assuming when we write a synthetic word sum, it is to be the parts that would make up the whole. Analytically, it's an analytical sum if we're starting with the whole word, right?
Okay.
Correction. Is that right, Petronella? That's how you explain it?
Yeah, and it took me a while when I started working with Pete back in the day, why it's so important to be spelling out loud as you're doing it and then doing the word sum. And if we think of a word like sign to signal, when we say it, we don't see that connection with the spelling and how it stays the same. So it took me a while to wrap my head around the rationale and to be able to articulate that. But even if you look at helped and how many kids printed as H-E-L-P-T, but it's H-E-L-P plus E-D is rewritten as, and you're not saying the pronunciation, you're reinforcing the affix at the end, right? So,
right. Yeah. So Diana, there's the difference, right? So there's a synthetic word sum that starts with the parts to the whole. And then the analytical would be the starting at the whole, breaking up into the parts. There's nothing wrong to do both ways either, right? Because we can come at morphology all these different ways. The more you can come at them differently is going to solidify the understanding of those words more too, right?
Yeah.
And we spell it aloud because often with a lot of the words in the English language, the pronunciation changes when we're adding those suffixes, right? So this is another build that we can do on another day throughout our week-long structure. It's called the word matrix. So I'm going to put a link into the chat and you guys are going to go in and play with this. You're going to love this. This is now where students are going to make their own matrix for the word that they've been working on. Okay, and I'll show you how it works and how you can play with it here. So on the screen, you're going to notice that our word that we were working on this week is H-E-L-P, help, which means to aid or support. So students would actually go in there and put their working base in there and the definition of the word. Then they would go and build all the word sums that they've been working on. Okay, so our first word sum might be helping. And when you do this, Mini Matrix Maker, if you look at the instructions, you have to put your word that you're working on, your base, with a capital letter. So H, you'll notice I capitalized in the word H-E-L-P, help, plus the ing is rewritten as helping. Okay. Now, if you get into the matrix, when I try to push return here, and I don't know, Petronella, if you've been in here and played here, the return doesn't seem to work for me, but if I use the space bar, it does. So you have to put each entry on a new line. So I'm just going to go down and I am going to get the kids to, and I would be supporting and helping them with this for sure for a while, right? We're just going to go now and enter our word sums. So you can get in there and you can play. And like I said, you have to have a capital letter on your base. And if the return isn't working, use the space bar. It seems to work that way for me. And really what's happening in my head when I'm doing this is I'm actually saying the words or the letters that make up that word in my head, right? So when kids have to break these words up and like think through in that way, it helps to solidify the spelling. You end up with what we call this word matrix that you see now in front of you. So once you've finished entering all that stuff, you would, oh, what is my button on there? I missed what the button said on there. I don't know if it's create or, sorry.
It's update.
Update. Yeah. So you'll push
Yeah.
the update button on your matrix. And when you do, this is what you land yourself with. So this is the matrix. And so this is the fun stuff about now we've developed this matrix, and the rules of the matrix are to the left-hand side here. When you're making a matrix, we read it from left to right when we're putting those words all together, but I am not allowed to skip over a column. So I couldn't go unhelpness as an example. So you're not allowed to skip through columns when you're making words. And sometimes when we get into more complicated words, what happens at the joins when we add those prefixes and suffixes, something might happen like dropping a Y and adding an IES. But this is fun work. Kids enjoy this kind of stuff. So that could become part of our week-long structure. This interactive suffix checker right here on the right-hand side, so you can kind of see me clicking here. This is a beautiful tool that kids can go in now and go on this running version, which is the left-hand side up here. They can go in and now they can make a word. So if my word sum was HELP plus the ING, which is giving me the word helping, what they can do is they can go down here and click on the statements that are true. So does my suffix begin with a consonant letter or a vowel? It begins with a vowel. The ING is my suffix, so it begins with a vowel. I'm going to click here because it's true. Then it gives me the next piece. So click on the next statement that's true. Does the base or stem end with a W or an X? No. Does the base or stem end with one or more than another consonant letter? So LP, that might work. The base or stem ends with just one consonant letter. The base or stem ends with a single silent E. No, the base or stem ends with a vowel letter, including the Y. It ends with that consonant, and there's actually two of them. So this statement would be true. And then it says, just add the suffix. So it's telling the kids then you're going to have your base, which is HELP. All you have to do is add ING, and now you're going to have the word spelled correctly. So you wouldn't have to add another P as an example. Okay.